The sun stood high over the desert, burning the endless waves of sand with its sharp light. The wind moved slowly, lifting grains of dust that shimmered in the heat. A small group of explorers had gathered near a line of worn stones that peeked through the surface like the tips of buried walls. Their camp looked fragile against the vast emptiness, but it held the tools and tents they needed for the long work of digging. Aaron, the leader of the team, stood with his hat low over his eyes. He studied the stones with care, brushing away the sand that had hidden them for centuries. He was not a man of grand words. His passion was history, and he believed that each piece of rock carried a voice from the past. Many would have passed by this lonely stretch of desert, but Aaron had noticed the pattern of the stones from a satellite image months before. Now he was certain they were the first signs of something greater. Beside him worked Leon, quiet but focused. She was skilled in reading old carvings, and her sharp eyes missed nothing. She moved with patience, pressing her fingers against the stone surface, feeling grooves that had not seen sunlight for 1,000 years. Her breath caught when she found a faint symbol that looked like a bird with wide wings, but it was carved in a style she had never studied before. Another member, Thomas, brought water for the team and set down the heavy packs of equipment. He was strong, cheerful, and always ready to keep the group steady when their work grew long. He glanced at the symbol that Leon had uncovered and frowned. "That doesn't look like anything I've seen in the museums," Thomas said. Leon nodded. "It is close to Egyptian style, but not the same. It feels older, maybe from a time we do not understand." Aaron crouched beside them. He traced the mark with his hand, his face growing serious. The grooves were deep and clean, not worn by weather. That meant they had been buried before time could destroy them. He felt a rush of excitement. The desert was full of secrets, but few of them stayed untouched for this long. By the end of the day, the team had cleared more sand away and uncovered the top of a doorway sealed by heavy blocks. The stones formed a perfect arch, stronger than the ruins they usually found. Aaron's heart pounded as he studied the doorway. He knew they were standing on something more than a forgotten tomb. Night fell across the desert, bringing cool air after the blazing heat. The team gathered around a small fire, their faces lit by its soft glow. The sky above stretched wide, filled with stars so clear they seemed close enough to touch. Aaron spoke in a steady voice. "This is no simple burial site. Look at the way the stones are cut. Look at the marks on the walls. Someone built this place to last forever, and I think we are the first to see it since it was sealed." Leon leaned forward. "But why seal it so carefully? The symbols feel like a warning, not a decoration. The wings, the chains carved near the base. They tell us something was locked inside." Thomas laughed, though not with ease. "Maybe it is treasure hidden so no thief could ever reach it. Gold, jewels, the riches of a forgotten king." Aaron shook his head. "No, treasure is shown proudly. This was hidden. Buried under sand, sealed under stone, guarded by symbols. This is not a gift for the future. It is a secret someone wanted never to be found." The fire cracked and silence settled over the group. The desert seemed to listen, holding its breath. The next morning they began to move the blocking stones. It took hours of hard work, sweat pouring down their faces, arms aching with the effort. The doorway slowly revealed itself, and with it came a rush of air from inside. The air was heavy, carrying a scent of dust and something strange like metal left in the sun. Inside, the darkness stretched far, broken only by the weak light of their lamps. The walls glittered faintly, as if tiny pieces of gold had been pressed into the stone. Aaron stepped forward, his lamp raised high. The walls were covered in carvings. Chains wound around human figures, and above them stood taller shapes that did not look human at all. The figures were sharp and cold, their eyes carved wide and cruel. Leon pressed her hand against the nearest wall. Her voice dropped low. "These are not kings. These are prisoners. They were chained here." Aaron's eyes narrowed. "And someone wanted to keep them here forever." The silence of the tomb deepened, and for the first time the team felt the weight of what they had uncovered. It was not just history lying before them. It was a secret that had been locked away for ages, a story of chains, prisoners, and something far greater than gold. As they stood in the doorway, the desert wind howled faintly through the opening, as if the world itself warned them not to go deeper. Yet none of them turned back. Curiosity burned stronger than fear, and they stepped inside, ready to uncover the mystery of the Pharaoh's tomb of broken chains. The deeper they stepped into the tomb, the heavier the air grew. Each breath felt thick, as though the chamber had not been touched by life for countless years. Their lamps shone across walls lined with strange carvings, and the more they uncovered, the more it seemed the tomb was not built to honor a ruler but to guard against something dangerous. Aaron kept his lamp high, his eyes scanning the walls. Every carving told a story, yet it was not the story of triumph he expected to see in a pharaoh's resting place. Instead, he saw human forms bound by golden chains. The figures strained against their bonds, but the chains held fast, wrapping their arms, legs, and necks. Above them stood tall shapes with elongated limbs and heads, carved in a style that seemed out of place in ancient Egypt. Their expressions were cold, almost lifeless, as though the artist had wanted to strip them of warmth. Thomas slowed as he studied the images. These are not gods. They look wrong, like shadows pretending to be men. Leon ran her hand along the lines of a chain carved into the wall. She felt the grooves press against her fingers. This was a prison. These people were not buried in honor. They were locked away, forced to carry their chains even in death. As they walked further, the ground beneath them changed. At first, the floor was smooth stone, polished to reflect the faint gleam of their lamps. But then they found broken fragments scattered across the path. Aaron crouched, lifting one of the pieces. It was not stone at all. It was a fragment of a golden chain, twisted as if pulled apart by great force. What made his skin prickle was that it still clung to a brittle fragment of bone. He set it down carefully. These were real chains, not only carvings. They bound people here. Thomas bent to look closer, his face tightening. They buried men in chains. Why would anyone do that? Leon answered softly, her voice steady but grim. Not just to punish them, to contain them. The walls show a pattern, almost like the chains are part of a design. Perhaps the chains were not only restraints but part of a seal. They pressed deeper into the chamber, and the silence seemed to grow. It was not the silence of empty air, but something heavier, as if the walls themselves held their breath. Every sound they made, from the scrape of boots on stone to the faint clink of equipment, seemed swallowed by the space. Aaron felt the silence in his chest. It was a silence that pressed against him, warning him to turn back. The chamber opened wider, revealing rows of alcoves carved into the walls. In each alcove lay a figure wrapped in faded linen, their arms and legs bound in golden links. Time had blackened the wrappings, but the metal still shone faintly, as though untouched by the years. Some chains had broken, but others remained tight, circling bones that had long since turned brittle. Thomas stepped back, his voice uneasy. They buried prisoners alive. Look at them. They were locked here with the gold. This is not treasure. This is something darker. Aaron studied the rows carefully. He noticed that each alcove was placed with precision, forming a circle around the chamber. The chains glimmered in their lamps, connected like a vast web. His mind turned quickly. This was not random. This was deliberate. The prisoners themselves had been made part of a design. Leon spoke after a long silence. This is not only a tomb, it is a seal. The prisoners were the seal. Their chains formed the barrier. Aaron felt a chill move through him. The idea unsettled him, yet the carvings on the wall supported it. They showed not only chains but also flowing lines of energy, passing through gold, circling around the human forms. He thought of the Pharaoh's command, the choice to use men as part of something far greater than death. The team gathered near the center of the chamber, where a large block of stone stood upright. Its surface was carved with lines more detailed than the rest, almost glowing in the lamplight. It depicted a great chain shattering into pieces. Beneath the chain, smaller human figures raised their arms in defiance. Above them, the tall shadow-like beings recoiled, their forms twisting as though struck down. Leon's eyes widened. This carving shows rebellion. These prisoners fought back. They were not only captives. They were warriors who resisted something greater. Aaron's hand lingered over the image. His voice was quiet, steady. And when they were buried here, they became part of the seal. Perhaps they chose this fate. Perhaps they gave their lives to keep something imprisoned. The silence of the tomb pressed harder, almost as if it disapproved of their presence. Thomas shifted uncomfortably, glancing at the dark corners. If that is true, then why are we here? Should we not leave it as it is? Aaron's jaw tightened. Curiosity burned in him stronger than fear. We cannot turn back now. If this is true, then we are standing in front of a history no one has ever known. The world believes it knows the story of the pharaohs, but this may change everything. The lamps flickered, though no wind touched them. A faint sound carried through the chamber, soft as a sigh. It was so slight that at first they thought it was the scrape of stone settling. But as they listened closer, the sound repeated like a whisper too low to form words. Leon's breath caught. "Do you hear that?" The others froze, their eyes searching the shadows. The sound came again, steady and patient, like a voice trying to reach them from the depths of the walls. Aaron raised his lamp higher, forcing his voice to remain firm. "The tomb is not silent anymore. We have woken something." The broken chains scattered on the floor glimmered in the lamp's glow as if waiting to be gathered again. The team stood in the heart of the chamber, caught between fear and discovery, knowing the path ahead would reveal truths buried far deeper than gold. The faint whispers did not leave the explorers even when they moved deeper into the tomb. At times the sound seemed to come from behind them, then from the walls, then from the very stones under their feet. It was never loud, but it carried the weight of voices that had waited for centuries to be heard. Aaron led the way, lamp raised high. The passage widened into a tall chamber, its walls covered with murals painted in colors that had somehow survived time. Reds, blacks, and faint traces of gold shimmered when their lights passed over them. The air grew colder, and the team felt as if they had stepped into a place that was not meant to be touched. Leon moved closer to the nearest mural. Her trained eyes followed the painted story. She saw rows of prisoners chained together, their faces drawn with suffering but also with strength. Above them stood the tall figures they had seen carved before. These beings wore strange crowns shaped like horns and held rods that glowed with power. Yet what struck her most was the way the gold paint was used. Thin lines of gold stretched from the prisoners to the crowns of the tall figures, as if the energy of the chains was being directed upward. "This is not treasure," Leon whispered. "The gold was used for something. It carried force like a river carrying water. The chains were not just symbols. They were tools." Thomas frowned as he studied another wall. "Look here. This shows the Pharaoh himself. But he is not standing with the tall figures. He is standing with the prisoners holding a broken chain in his hand." Aaron stepped closer. The Pharaoh's image was bold, painted in deep red and lined with gold. His eyes looked forward, not at the figures of power but at the chains. In one hand he held the crook and flail, symbols of kingship, but in the other he gripped a chain that had been shattered. The broken links shone brighter than anything else in the mural. "This Pharaoh chose rebellion," Aaron said slowly. "He turned against those beings. He buried his prisoners not as punishment but as guardians. He used gold not to honor death but to lock something away." They moved around the chamber, following the murals like pages of a story. The images grew darker as they continued. They saw storms painted over fields, rivers turning black and tall figures towering above burning cities. Then came the final mural, larger than the rest, stretching across the far wall. It showed the prisoners standing in a circle, each bound in golden chains. The chains connected them together, forming a great pattern that looked like a circle of fire. At the center of the circle lay a dark figure, bound and pressed to the ground, its form unclear, as though even the artist had struggled to capture it. Above the circle, the Pharaoh raised both hands, calling upon the heavens. Aaron stared at the mural for a long time. This is the heart of it. They sacrificed themselves to form the seal. Their chains became the barrier. Whatever lies at the center was trapped here, and the Pharaoh gave his people to keep it from rising again. Thomas rubbed the back of his neck uneasily. "Then why do I feel as if the seal is still alive? Look at the way the gold shines. It should have faded like the paint, but it glows even now." Leon nodded, her face pale in the lamplight. The gold was not chosen for wealth. It was chosen for what it could do. It carries energy, it binds, it remembers. The whispers grew clearer for a moment, filling the chamber like a breath. Aaron turned sharply, holding his lamp toward the shadows. Nothing moved, yet the sound carried the shape of words, though none of them could understand the language. It was a voice not of one, but of many, rising together in warning. They pressed onward into a narrow hall at the end of the chamber. The walls here were rougher, less polished, as if built in haste. In the center of the hall stood a pedestal of stone, and upon it lay broken chains of pure gold. The links were massive, heavier than any chain they had seen before, each one engraved with small marks that pulsed faintly in their light. Aaron bent closer. These are not ordinary symbols. They look like hieroglyphs but twisted, altered, as if they were shaped to fit another language. Leon crouched beside him, tracing the marks with her eyes. It is a mixture. Human and not human, a warning written by two hands. On the wall behind the pedestal, a single inscription stretched across the stone. Unlike the murals, this one was sharp and clear, carved deep so it would never be lost. Aaron held his lamp close, reading the figures aloud. His voice echoed softly. They rise when chains are broken. They fall when chains remain. Guard the seal, or all will be undone. Silence filled the hall after his voice faded. The team stood still, the meaning sinking into them. The tomb was not a resting place of kings, but a warning carved in gold and blood. Thomas shifted uneasily, his eyes darting toward the pedestal. If this is true, then disturbing the chains may break the seal. We could already be risking it. Aaron's hand lingered over the golden links. Or we could be standing at the threshold of a truth greater than any history we know. We cannot leave without learning more. The chains glimmered as if alive, catching the light of their lamps with unnatural brightness. The whispers returned, stronger now, rolling through the chamber like a tide. The explorers felt the weight of the warning pressing against them, but none stepped back. They knew the golden truth was waiting, and they were already too deep to turn away. The explorers stood in silence, their lamps casting long shadows across the walls. The whispers had grown stronger, though still faint like the echo of a voice carried through stone. None of them could make sense of the words, yet the sound stirred unease in their hearts. It felt less like language and more like a memory, as though the tomb itself spoke. Aaron kept his eyes forward, refusing to let fear control him. His hand tightened on the lamp as he led the group further down the hall. The stone passage turned sharply, descending in narrow steps. The air grew colder and the walls sweated with dampness. Every step echoed, and each echo sounded like more footsteps than the ones they made. Thomas broke the silence first. I don't like this. The sound is wrong. It follows us. Leon's voice was calm, though her eyes were sharp. It is not the sound that follows us. It is the place itself. The tomb reacts to us. We have disturbed its balance. They reached the bottom of the steps where the passage opened into another chamber. This room was different from the others. The walls were not painted or carved with murals. Instead, they were covered with rows of golden chains nailed into the stone. Each chain formed part of a great pattern, linking together like the threads of a net. At the center of the floor stood a circle of stone slabs, each marked with a symbol that seemed to glow faintly in the lamplight. Aaron stepped carefully into the chamber. He traced the lines of the chains with his lamp. This is a design. Not art, not ceremony. A design made to hold power. Leanne moved to one of the slabs, crouching low. Her fingers hovered above the mark without touching it. It feels alive. The symbols remind me of circuits, like lines carrying energy. The gold binds them together. Tomas looked around with unease. Circuits in a tomb? This was built thousands of years ago. How could they know such things? Aaron's face grew stern. Because they were not alone. The tall figures we saw in the murals were not of this world. Perhaps they brought knowledge with them, and humanity turned it against them. As they studied the chamber, the whispers grew louder, rising and falling like breath. The sound was clearer now, though still beyond their understanding. It seemed to come from the very chains, vibrating softly, as if they carried not only energy but voices. Thomas gripped his pack tightly. We should leave. We have already seen more than enough. This is not a place for the living. But Aaron's curiosity burned brighter. He walked to the center of the stone circle and lifted his lamp high. The glow spread across the slabs, and for a moment the symbols pulsed faintly, as if answering the light. His voice was steady but filled with wonder. This is not only a tomb. It is a machine built of stone and gold. These prisoners became part of the design. Their sacrifice made the seal strong. Leon's eyes widened. Then disturbing it could weaken it. Even our presence might shift its balance. Before Aaron could reply, the ground trembled faintly beneath them. The chains along the walls shivered, ringing softly like bells. The whispers turned sharper, rising to a cry that filled the chamber. Leon covered her ears, but the sound was not only heard. It was felt inside the body, pressing into the bones. The tremor passed and silence returned, though heavier than before. Aaron lowered his lamp, his breath uneven. The seal is not dead. It still holds. But it grows weaker with time. They pressed further into the chamber, following a narrow tunnel on the far side. The This passage was carved with jagged lines as though cut in haste. The floor was uneven, scattered with fragments of gold and stone. As they walked, Leon noticed that the fragments formed small patterns, broken pieces of the larger design. Every piece mattered, she said softly. Every chain, every mark. Together they built the prison. Without them, the seal breaks. The tunnel led them into a vast underground hall, larger than anything they had seen so far. The ceiling stretched high above, lost in darkness. Pillars rose on either side, carved with the same twisted symbols that mixed human and otherworldly design. At the far end of the hall stood a great vault of stone, sealed by a wall of golden chains that glimmered in their lamps. The sight made them pause. The chains were thicker here, and some were cracked, their glow faint. The vault behind them seemed to breathe, the stone shifting almost too slightly to notice. Aaron's heart pounded. This is it. The center. The prison. Thomas stepped back, shaking his head. If the chains are breaking, then we should leave. This is not our fight. We cannot hold back what they sealed here. But Aaron's eyes burned with determination. The world has forgotten this story. Humanity once fought against these beings. If they could resist, then so can we. We must understand what lies within. The whispers swelled again, but now they carried a strange rhythm, almost like words forming at the edge of hearing. Leon gripped her lamp tightly, her voice low. It is speaking. Whatever is inside, it knows we are here. The golden chains rattled faintly, though no hand touched them. The echo filled the hall, deep and hollow, as if countless voices cried together. The explorers stood frozen, caught between fear and wonder. Aaron took a slow breath. This is more than history. This is a warning written in chains, and now it speaks to us. The hall trembled once more, and the sound of the chains rang through the darkness like the voice of the tomb itself. The echoes followed them, deep and unending, reminding them that each step brought them closer to the heart of the secret buried for ages. The explorers stood at the edge of the great hall, staring at the sealed vault. The golden chains shimmered faintly in their lamps, and though some were broken, most still held firm. The silence around the vault was heavy, filled with the memory of countless lives given to keep whatever was inside from rising. Aaron felt the weight of history pressing on him. He stepped closer, studying the cracked links. His hand hovered over one, though he did not touch it. The surface of the chain seemed warm, as if it still carried a pulse of life. Leon joined him, her eyes sharp and focused. These chains are not only metal, they carry something of the prisoners themselves. Their sacrifice became part of the seal. The gold was the vessel, but the power came from them. Aaron turned toward her, his face thoughtful. Then this tomb is not a prison built by one man. It is the legacy of those who chose to give their lives. The Pharaoh led them, but the strength came from the people. Thomas stood further back, his arms crossed tightly. His voice was low, filled with unease. If that is true, then this place is not only a warning. It is a graveyard of warriors. We are standing in the middle of their sacrifice. We should not disturb it. Aaron shook his head. We cannot ignore it either. History has hidden this truth. Humanity fought back once, and we deserve to know how. They moved along the walls of the hall, their lamps uncovering more carvings. Here the story continued in sharp relief, etched deep into stone so it would never fade. They saw images of men and women standing against the tall, shadow-like beings. The humans were smaller, weaker in form, but their eyes were drawn wide with defiance. In one carving, they broke chains with their bare hands. In another, they stood around a great circle, their bodies drawn into the seal. Leon paused at one particular carving. It showed a prisoner kneeling, chains covering his arms and legs, but his face was calm, proud. Behind him, a tall figure reached down, yet the prisoner looked not at the enemy but at the sky. His expression was not of fear but of choice. They knew what they were doing, Leon said softly. They were not victims. They gave themselves willingly. They believed their sacrifice would protect the world. Aaron placed his hand on the carving, tracing the lines with care. Then this is their legacy. Humanity has always been seen as fragile, small against the vastness of the universe. But here we see the truth. They resisted. They chose courage. That is what was buried. The whispers rose again, curling through the chamber like smoke. This time the sound was clearer, almost forming words in a tongue none of them knew. The air vibrated faintly and the chains trembled as though touched by unseen hands. Thomas stepped back quickly, fear rising in his eyes. It is them, he said. The prisoners. Their voices remain in the chains. They are warning us. Leon listened closely. She could not understand the words, yet she felt the meaning pressing into her. Her heart tightened as she spoke. Yes, they warn us to remember, to guard the seal, to honor what they gave. Aaron's face was set, steady and strong. And we will. But first we must see what lies inside that vault. We cannot walk away with only half the story. They approached the great chains that sealed the vault. The light from their lamps reflected across the golden links, filling the hall with a soft glow. The vault itself was carved with marks, the same mixture of human and other symbols they had seen before. But here the carvings told not of prisoners but of a battle. The scene showed humans striking back against their oppressors. Spears, stones, and fire were painted against rods of energy and crowns of light. The tall figures staggered while humans stood tall. The final image showed a circle of men and women bound in gold, their chains forming a wall around a dark shadow that struggled at the center. Aaron studied the image with awe. This is the truth. Humanity did not only suffer. They fought, they resisted, and they won. Their victory was buried here, hidden so no one would know. Perhaps to protect us, perhaps to keep us from seeking what was sealed. Leon lowered her lamp, her voice soft but firm. It was never about treasure. It was about memory. The gold, the tomb, the carvings, everything was left so the truth would not be forgotten. Thomas rubbed his face with his hand, his voice filled with doubt. And yet we walk here now, disturbing their rest. If their victory came at such a cost, then opening that vault may undo everything. The hall grew colder, and the whispers swelled, filling the air like the cries of a distant crowd. The explorers felt the sound in their bones, urging them to stop, warning them of danger. Yet curiosity and courage pulled them forward. Aaron placed both hands on the chains, feeling their strange warmth. He closed his eyes for a moment, imagining the men and women who had once stood where he stood, who had chosen to give their lives for the future. When he opened his eyes again, his voice was steady. This is their legacy. Humanity is not weak. Humanity is not silent. They left us this truth and we must face it. The vault shuddered faintly as though it had heard his words. The chains rattled once more, their sound echoing through the hall like the ringing of ancient bells. The explorers stood before the seal of the prisoners, knowing they were closer than ever to the heart of the mystery, and to the shadow that waited within. The explorers stood before the great vault, their lamps trembling slightly in their hands. The golden chains stretched across the entrance, some broken, others still shining with a strange energy. The air was thick and heavy, pressing on their chests as if the tomb itself breathed around them. Aaron stepped closer, studying the pattern of the chains. These are not ordinary locks. Each link is part of the seal. Breaking one could awaken what is inside. Thomas glanced nervously at the broken chains. Then why do we stay? If disturbing this seal can release something, we should leave immediately. Leon's voice was calm but firm. We cannot leave. The tomb has been waiting for us to understand. It will reveal its story, whether we disturb the chains or not. We must be careful. Aaron knelt near the center of the entrance. His lamp shone on a thick link engraved with symbols that pulsed faintly. He traced the lines with his fingers, careful not to touch the carved grooves directly. The seal is fragile. Even a small shift could set something in motion. We have to be precise. They began examining the broken chains. Each link seemed alive in some way, humming faintly and reflecting their lamplight in unusual ways. The symbols on the chains were intricate, combining human and otherworldly forms. Leanne crouched beside one, her fingers hovering above the gold. These are more than metal. They carry the memory of the prisoners. Their courage, their defiance, their sacrifice, it all flows through these chains. Tomas swallowed hard. And if we disrupt it, we risk losing them and waking what they fought to imprison. Aaron nodded, his jaw tight. I know, that is why we must work carefully. We need to restore the broken links, or at least understand the design before we go further. As they moved to examine the far side of the chains, the tomb reacted. The air seemed to shift, growing colder. A low rumble echoed through the hall, soft but steady. The chains rattled, vibrating along the walls. The whispers returned, louder this time, like a chorus rising from the stones themselves. Leanne's breath caught as she listened. They are warning us, she said softly. The seal is awakening because it senses us here. The rumble grew slightly stronger and the shadows along the walls shifted as if alive. Thomas stepped back, his eyes wide with fear. I told you. We should have left. The tomb is alive. Aaron held his lamp high, his voice steady. No, the tomb is not alive in the way you fear. It is holding a balance. The prisoners created it, and their memory remains in the chains. We must respect it, but we cannot let fear control us. A sudden vibration passed through the floor, sharper than before. The broken chains trembled violently, clinking against the stone. Sparks of golden light seemed to jump between the links, though no fire touched them. The air thickened, and the whispers grew into voices, crying, warning, and chanting in a language they could not understand. Leon held her lamp tightly. They are stronger than I imagined. If we fail, the seal could collapse entirely. Aaron's hands moved carefully along the chains, testing their alignment. He noticed that some links had shifted slightly out of place. We must return them to their original positions. Every link matters. The pattern they formed is not random. It holds power and prevents whatever is trapped from escaping. Thomas watched in silence, his unease growing. And if we make a mistake? Aaron looked at him without hesitation. Then the prisoner's sacrifice is undone. We cannot allow that. Working together, the team began the delicate task of adjusting the chains. Each link had to be turned, rotated, and carefully positioned so that the gold connected properly with the engraved patterns. The chains hummed softly, reacting to their touch. The whispers softened slightly as they restored each link, as though the tomb acknowledged their respect. Minutes passed like hours. The air pulsed with energy, and shadows danced along the walls. Leanne traced her fingers over one final link at the center of the pattern. It was broken, its ends twisted. She aligned it with care, pressing it into place. The chain glowed brightly for a moment, and the rumble faded. The whispers became soft echoes, fading into the silence of the tomb. Aaron exhaled slowly, his hands trembling. The seal is stable again. The chains hold. Whatever was stirring inside is quiet once more. Thomas rubbed his arms, trying to shake off the chill. That was too close. I do not think I have ever felt anything like it. Leon nodded, still focused on the chains. The prisoners left their strength here. They gave everything to keep the world safe. We have to remember that. Their legacy is not only in the carvings or the chains. It is in the courage they showed and the sacrifice they made. The team stepped back from the vault, their lamps illuminating the hall one last time. The golden chains shimmered faintly, resting in perfect alignment. The tomb was quiet now, but the weight of the history within it lingered. Aaron lowered his lamp and looked at the vault with quiet reverence. We have seen the heart of their struggle. The seal remains and their story lives on. But we cannot take this lightly. The power here is beyond anything the world has known, and it is our responsibility to honor it. The explorers turned to leave the hall, each step echoing in the vast space. The tomb had tested them, revealing both danger and courage. They had learned the truth about the prisoners, their chains, and the seal. And though the shadow of what lay inside still waited silently, they knew the tomb had allowed them to witness the legacy of humanity's strength and the price of defiance. The explorers walked slowly through the vast hall, their lamps casting long beams of light across the golden chains. The tomb was quiet now, though a faint hum lingered in the air, a reminder that the seal they had restored carried a power beyond their understanding. Each step echoed, reminding them of the prisoners who had once stood here and given their lives to protect the world. Aaron stopped near the center of the chamber, looking back at the vault. The chains glimmered faintly, aligned perfectly as though waiting for nothing and everything at the same time. "We have restored the seal," he said, his voice steady. "The prisoner's work is safe again. Whatever is inside will remain trapped, and their legacy will live on." Leon crouched beside a chain, her fingers brushing its surface. "It is strange," she whispered. "I feel their presence, but it is not threatening. It is as if they are thanking us for understanding." Thomas nodded slowly, still uneasy, but calmer than before. "I never thought I would witness something like this. Gold chains, a tomb built to hold power and courage. I feel like I have walked through history itself." The explorers moved toward the exit, each step careful as they retraced their path. The golden chains reflected their lamps, and shadows danced along the walls, soft and slow. For a moment the hall felt alive, but not dangerous. It felt like a place that remembered the courage of humanity and allowed the living to honor it. As they reached the wide chamber near the entrance, Aaron paused. He looked at the walls covered in murals and carvings. The images of prisoners standing tall against their oppressors seemed to shimmer faintly in the light. He realized the story they had uncovered was not one of defeat, but of strength. The prisoners had chosen to fight, to resist, and even in death they had made the world safer. Leon spoke softly, almost to herself. Humanity has always been seen as weak. The tomb proves otherwise. We were small against the unknown, but we resisted. We used courage and intelligence to survive. Thomas glanced at her, understanding the weight of her words. And now their story is ours to tell. The world will not know exactly what they faced, but we can honor it. That is enough. They continued toward the exit, passing the golden chains one last time. Aaron felt a strange warmth in his chest. The tomb had tested them, and they had understood it. They had seen the prisoners' courage, felt the power of their sacrifice, and returned it to balance. In that moment, he knew the tomb's true purpose had not ended with death. It was meant to teach, to remind, and to inspire. Outside, the desert stretched endlessly under the afternoon sun. The wind moved slowly, lifting grains of sand that sparkled in the light. The camp seemed small compared to the vast emptiness, but it held the explorers who had witnessed history. Each of them carried a sense of reverence and awe, a knowledge that humanity had once faced great danger and had not broken. Leon stood quietly, gazing at the desert horizon. "The world will never know what we have seen," she said, "but that does not make it less important. The prisoner's courage is now part of us, part of the story of humanity." Aaron nodded. "We have learned that strength does not always come from weapons or numbers. Sometimes it comes from choice, from courage, from the willingness to face the unknown and stand firm." Thomas looked down at the small fragments of gold they had carried with them to study. Even these pieces seemed to hum faintly, carrying the memory of the chains and the prisoners. "We have a responsibility now," he said, "to honor them, to remember them, and to protect what they protected." As they packed their equipment, a quiet sense of accomplishment settled over them. They had faced fear, mystery, and the unknown power of the tomb, yet they had survived. More importantly, they had understood. They had uncovered a truth that had been hidden for centuries. Humanity's strength was not measured by size or wealth, but by courage, wisdom, and sacrifice. The explorers set out across the desert, leaving the tomb sealed and silent behind them. The wind shifted, carrying the grains of sand across the stones that had stood for thousands of years. The golden chains remained in place, resting perfectly, holding the seal, holding the secret, and keeping the shadow imprisoned. Aaron looked back one final time, his eyes resting on the hidden doorway. The prisoners gave everything to keep the world safe. Their story will live on in our hearts, even if no one else ever sees it. Leon smiled faintly, her eyes reflecting the sunlight. "We are witnesses now. We will remember, and in remembering, we honor them." Thomas shook his head with a quiet laugh, relief and wonder in his voice. "I never imagined discovering a tomb could teach us so much." They were brave beyond words, and we are the ones who can carry that legacy forward. The explorers moved steadily across the desert, leaving the tomb behind. The golden chains remained silent and unbroken, guarding the secret of the prisoners and their sacrifice. And though the tomb itself would remain hidden, the truth of the courage and defiance it contained now lived in the hearts of those who had seen it. Humanity had faced the unknown and risen to the challenge. In the distance, the sun dipped lower toward the horizon, casting a golden glow across the desert sands. The tomb remained, a monument to strength, sacrifice, and the enduring power of the human spirit. The legacy of the prisoners would remain unbroken, waiting for those who were willing to learn, to honor, and to remember. The explorers continued their journey, carrying not treasure, not gold, but knowledge. Knowledge of courage, of resistance, and of a humanity capable of standing against darkness. Their steps were steady, their hearts full, knowing they had witnessed something that would stay with them forever. The tomb of broken chains stood silent behind them, but its story had reached the world, through the eyes and hearts of those who dared to uncover it. Humanity's truth had been unearthed,